You're back on the Comsteria podcast. Hello, this is Colin Kelly, and I've got a quick media training interview tip for you today. I suppose you could also use this maybe in a presentation type situation where maybe you're taking questions from the floor, might be your own staff if you're speaking to your staff at some sort of meeting that you're having. Now, this is a bit of a negative technique. You'll see it used a lot. Politicians use it a lot. It's one of the reasons people tend not to like politicians because they feel they're being evasive. So please do use this with caution. One of the things I always try and do in our media training sessions is I try to be positive. So if there's something wrong, rather than you trying to evade it and wriggle out of it, I would much rather that you fix the issue. And that's one of the things that we don't shy away from this in our media training. I would rather say to you, look, here's how, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's how people are going to perceive it. So why don't you fix it? And then you don't need to defend the issue or wriggle out of it because you'll have fixed the problem. So we like to try and get to the root of it. However, some of you might just want a bit of a break from the criticism that you're getting. Sometimes I suppose journalists can maybe be a little unfair in their criticism. We like to think that the world is very black and white, and of course it rarely is. This is an election year. There's going to be MPs campaigning to save their seat, and when we look back at my local MP's performance over the last 4 or 5 years or so, however they've been in post since the last election, how do I know whether they're good or bad, or it's right or wrong? What right have I got? So one of the techniques that you can use if you're facing this kind of criticism is it's called specific general, right? So the specific general transition can get you out of a tight spot. So for example, if you were being criticized for something very specific, you would try and steer the conversation round to talk about your performance in general. So, for example, if I was interviewing a government minister and I'm saying, what about the ferries? Your government, you're not delivering the ferries. The ferries are an absolute disaster. What they would try and do using this model is move it off the specific, which is the ferries, which are a shambles, and move it into their general performance. And that then gives them license to start talking about the other things that they've done. Now, it works best if it's related to the sector that the original criticism relates to. So if there's a question about the ferries being bad, you would try and keep it within transport or infrastructure. So you might talk about, for example, the railways, the change that you've made with ScotRail. You might start talking about maybe investment in roads, or maybe other things that you've done for island communities. So you move it from the specific issue relating to the ferries, and you talk more generally, but maybe on the same theme. And then you can also do the opposite. The opposite is true. If the criticism is very general, then you move it round to something very specific that you're proud of, a real achievement. So if somebody's saying, look, your turnover's down, you're losing customers, you've cut back on products and you've made people redundant, you would go very specific and you would say, well, yes, we've recalibrated our business, we've changed our offering, but actually we can see, if you just look at this division of the business, look at the growth from our online sales, or look at what we're doing with the 18 to 24 demographic, right? So you go very specific on something more positive. Now, I don't necessarily like it. However, and it won't always work because they might come back at you and say, yes, but hang on, I asked you about the ferries, or what about this, or what about these approval ratings? But it gives you maybe that breathing space and it can help balance things out. I also think, in fairness, when we look at the media, and even in your business, if you're taking questions from the floor, from your own staff, it would all be well and good if people genuinely did ask questions. But what we see a lot are opinions and statements dressed up as questions. A lot of journalists now, they don't even ask questions. They make big statements attacking you. And I've seen enough meetings where you'll say, right, we'll take some questions from the floor, and somebody gets up and they don't even ask a question. They just go on a rant. So I want to give you these tools and techniques. I want you to use them carefully. I would urge you to try and see yourself the way an outsider would see you and think, well, actually, we probably could do better. And there are things that where we maybe have failed at. And maybe I would always say in our full day training sessions, don't shy away from some of this stuff, because the trust and credibility is always more important than wriggling off the hook. And what we see so often in our media today is people that are so obsessed with wriggling off the hook that they end up losing all the trust and credibility. But all that said, especially with the climate and environment that we're in, where it can be quite hostile, and I think it can be unfair, then I think that technique, that general specific or specific general transition, can sometimes help you out of a tight spot. Thanks very much for listening. If you'd like to know more about what we do at Comsteria with powerful communication, why not visit our website at comsteria.co.uk.